Well, time for our big chat of the week here on the evening edition. Tonight, the Canadian comedian, writer, presenter, and actress Katherine Ryan. Katherine's currently touring with her stand-up show Mrs., published a Sunday Times best-selling book last year titled The Audacity, Why Being Too Much is Exactly Enough. And she's got a pretty much weekly podcast telling everybody everything, which I can vouch for is exactly the right title for what happens in that particular show. You're doing a bit of work, I know, Katherine, with the recipe box company Gausto on nostalgic foods. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. First of all, welcome to Times Radio, and tell me how you are. You're currently pregnant, aren't you, with your third child?
Yeah, I reunited with my high school sweetheart when we were 35, 36, just before lockdowns. We got married right away, and then I've been pregnant ever since. And that's really my story.
So you're going to have two kids under the age of two?
They'll be under 18 months. And I
Gosh.
feel like they don't quite qualify as Irish twins. My family is from Cork, but we wanted to have them close together. I'm 39, so you just never know. I didn't expect that it would happen this quickly, but I'm sure I'll be all right. I've been encouraged by certain moms and I've been warned by other moms. So if I land somewhere in between, I'll be very happy.
Oh, when is the baby due?
Soon, like the before the end of the year, we'll see. My son was a little bit early, and it only took like a few minutes for him to be born. So
Was
I'm
it a
not
quick
really.
swoosh and then out he came?
Yes, nearly in the car. So this
Oh
time
no.
we're not even going to attempt to leave. And my husband is working on me there. He's like, I don't want to deliver it. I said, well, you might have to. So strap in.
Have you been called a geriatric mum yet? Which is always
Yeah.
wonders. It is a wonderful compliment, isn't it?
I know you're geriatric post 35, but luckily we have so many older female icons to look up to that I don't feel like geriatric is a bad thing anymore. I've been called worse.
Yeah. The first time I was called it, I was just a bit taken aback by it, to be honest, because yeah, it came as a complete surprise. But I also feel like I've got two kids, you're about to have three.
Mm.
And to me, the game has completely changed between two and three kids, right? One
Oh,
kid, you've got one who's normally good, and then you've got a backup option if it all goes wrong with the
right.
first.
Hmm.
Three kids, that's proper mum territory, isn't it? If you say that you're a mother of three, I know that you're a serious mother. Do you know what I mean? Because that is pretty ambitious
Well,
in
then
my
my
books.
mom was a serious mother because she had three of us sort of 5 years apart total between the three of us. But I'm cheating because my eldest daughter is 13. So what I actually have is sort of a built-in au pair. And the baby is 15 months now, and he just loves her. He's like, please show me that young, symmetrical one again. And he just lights up when she gets home from school, and she's so helpful. So I don't know if you space them out as far as I have, if it really counts, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
I guess it means that you're doing that kind of nappy thing over a long period of time, but probably because there's such a big amount of time between Violet, who's your daughter, isn't she, and
Mm.
then your second child. That's all kind of gone away, hasn't it? The sort of trauma of nappies and toilet training and all of that kind of some of the tedium involved with having kids.
Well,
Let's
people,
let's be honest.
yeah, people dislike me for saying this. It sounds like I'm boasting, and in a way, I sort of am, but the nappy period is not long for me. Violet was potty trained completely at 10 months. And then my son,
Okay, we do hate
Fred,
you.
I know, but this is the thing. So I am not bound by cultural norms at all. And this has just been
In
an
anything.
under in anything. I just feel like just because we do something one way in England or in Canada or in the Western world, we swaddle babies up and we put them in their own rooms as newborns. I don't do that. My children don't sleep in a nursery. They sleep with me for as long as they want. And I potty train them from birth. And people think that I am a little bit nuts for doing so, but it's very popular in Eastern culture to do. And it actually works. And I thought Violet was just some sort of superstar, but it has worked with my son, Fred, too. And he has been mostly out of nappies since 8 months. Although, because he's a boy, I will try to delicately explain to you that he will just wee almost anywhere he wants to. But the other thing we have only had
Anywhere.
in the toilet, well, mostly outside. Wees are harder than the other thing. But he does not have any solid nappy stuff at all since he was 8 months old. And it can be done. And this is my thing that I feel like I have to communicate to the Western world is that if we were blessed to be home a little bit more because it's kind of impossible for a daycare worker to do this. And we have busy lives now. And I think that's what keeps kids in nappies so long, but it can be done. Anything you put your mind to can be done.
Yeah, even with a small child. That sounds very courageous. Are there any special preparations going on for number three? Have you had to do anything different? Have you learned from the first few times anything?
I have learned nothing. I feel like all that I've learned is that should plan not to have a plan. I feel like we're going to try to have this baby at home. We don't know. And I know that each of my children, just like my siblings and I, are so different, even though we had the same parents and the same upbringing. So I think you just relax as a parent and know that nature is largely in charge of who they're going to be. We are renovating the bedroom so that I can have two babies in with me rather than one. And we'll see how that goes. And otherwise, no, we're just really chill, actually. I'm doing a lot of touring. I wrap that up in March. No, March. Hopefully not March. I wrap
You're
up
having a baby on tour,
I
basically,
know.
is what you've just committed to.
No, I wrap my tour up November 16th in Manchester, and then I'm going to relax, I think, for the rest of the winter.
Katherine, have you got a weird pulsing noise coming through on your headphones?
No.
Oh, I'm just doing that. 1 2 1 2.
Oh, I can't hear it at all.
Can you hear me now? Is that okay?
Yeah, you sound
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, fine. I'm not sure whether it's in my head and I'm having.
Oh, this is what happens as a mother of three. This is what I have to look forward to.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. And is it right that you hid your pregnancy because you were worried about losing work?
Yeah, and I think that was a very legitimate fear. You cannot be insured by a regular insurance company for television production pregnant. And on the BBC's website, it says in black and white that pretty much any matter of the womb is excluded by their insurance. So when you do see pregnant performers, that has been underwritten by the production company, or someone has decided that they're special enough to go the extra mile and add to their insurance. But as a rule, the insurance companies will often exclude pregnancy, any trouble with menstruation, anything that any matter of the womb, you're out.
Is that right? Is that wrong? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think it's very wrong. And that's why I speak about it, because I feel like I'm in a position of privilege now where it turned out at the end of my pregnancy, I had to say, oh, okay, I'm expecting a baby. And I fully anticipated losing work because of that. And production companies did step up and they said, don't worry, we want to have you, we'll underwrite your insurance. And then I thought, well, that's not really even fair to the production. They have to go this extra mile, do extra admin just for me. And what about all the women who aren't protected by that same privilege? And I remember receiving an email when I was pregnant with my daughter, Violet. And the fact that someone's confident enough to write this in black and white, and I still have the email, and it wasn't the BBC, it was another big channel. They wrote me and said, oh, we'd love to have you for this project, but because you're pregnant, you can't be insured. And so you can't do the job. And it hurt my feelings so much at the time. I think, if you're the type of person that just gets burned up by injustice, I felt this sense of injustice. Like I had worked hard for this job and I would have been picked and I wanted it so badly, but because I was creating a taxpayer, helping the world, it meant that I was excluded. It just made me feel.
Well, they were discriminating against you, weren't you? Because you'd chosen to have a child, right?
There's a plane. How do you feel about that? Can you hear that?
No.
Okay. It doesn't qualify as discrimination. It's just part of many, many insurance policies.
Yeah.
It just is in black and white, and you can look it up. It's not me inventing it. Like that's the rule. And if you see any pregnant person, they've been underwritten by someone who felt like being generous.
Did anyone get annoyed with you when you revealed it and said, oh, well, you really should have told us about that, Katherine?
About being pregnant? No.
About showing it later on and saying, well, I knew that you were working on my production whilst you were 4 months, 5 months, and you really should have told me.
No, I think that actually productions want you to hide your pregnancy so that they don't have to deal with the extra health and safety.
Wow.
Think about it though, because it isn't their fault. It is extra admin for them. And I know in a lot of productions like films and sitcoms that even the actress is quietly told, like, oh, well, don't tell anyone about that. And you can keep doing your job and you just be sick every day into the bins. You just hide that. And if as long as you don't create any problems on set, we will act surprised, just like you can act surprised. And a lot of these people say, oh, well, I didn't even know. And I guess you can always say that. I didn't even realize until I was 8 months pregnant that I was pregnant. No one got annoyed with me. I think everyone, especially now there are more female producers and directors and just, family men who are very sensitive to these things too. They go, I understand why you did it. And also, we're encouraged not to tell anyone for the first 3 months
Yeah.
because that's a time of uncertainty. So the messaging is really mixed. And I just feel like, you're quite sick, especially in the beginning of your pregnancy. And some people have complications later in their pregnancies. And we still want to work and we still have to feed our families and do the best that we can. And a lot of us don't want to be excluded.
Yeah. Well, especially because we normally have to take some time off after having a baby as well. So often we're trying to stockpile, particularly if you're freelance or you're in the performing arts at all, you're basically thinking about stockpiling a little bit of cash so that you can take a bit of time off after you have a kid.
Yeah.
You discussed being in a privileged position, and I wonder whether that was also the viewpoint when earlier on in the year you talked about working on a TV program where you believed that a member of the production team was a sexual abuser, and you would call him predator to his face in front of others while working on that show, because what else could you do, I suppose? Do you regret revealing that? Did it cause lots of conjecture and speculation as to who it might be? And was that fair?
It wasn't a production person, it was a performer. And I don't regret revealing that because on the show, Backstage with Katherine Ryan, which is streaming on Prime Video, the whole point of the show was to give viewers an inside peek at what we actually do backstage before a gig. And unfortunately, these are some of the conversations that I have with my colleagues in our industry, because it is better just to have these quiet conversations and keep ourselves safe than try to actually report someone or make a change, because often there isn't sufficient evidence to do that or sufficient process to do that. It's a very complicated thing to be a whistleblower, and it doesn't work out in favor of everyone, even if they have a very legitimate concern. So there was a little bit of backlash. People said, well, you should just say who it is if you really want to protect people. But I feel like that is such an uninformed, very almost, what's the word? Like childlike wonderment. See, I've forgotten words now that I'm pregnant. Maybe
I can't even help you out.
like I think that's a sweet and innocent assumption.
Naive, I suppose.
Naive. There you go.
Yeah. Bang.
I think it's extraordinarily naive to say, oh, you should just say who it is and that'll be sorted. How many times does a serial predator finally get their comeuppance and people say, oh, we all knew that. Well, we knew about that person all along. It's almost every single time. With Harvey Weinstein, people said they knew all along. With Bill Cosby, people said they knew all along. With British people who have documentaries made about their wrongdoings, everyone says, oh yeah, everyone knew all along, but there's nothing we could do. And so for me, it's not about revenge or getting someone canceled. It's just about these quiet conversations, which unfortunately we do have, to share information and keep each other safe. It's not about making an accusation. It's just about safeguarding privately amongst each other.
You spoke to the Times newspaper around the same time, and you said, look, talking about such behavior publicly wasn't about cancelling anyone or outing anyone. It was just that if you want to get to the bottom of predatory behavior, rather than sensationalizing what women are saying, you've got to get to the men. You've got to stop the men from doing it effectively. I suppose people will want to know what happened to that particular person. Are they still behaving like this? Did the way that you decided to kind of act on it, did that work?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't chased it up. I just decided that if I was going to take this job, which again, I was conflicted about because of what I'd heard about this person. I thought, oh, do I want to put myself in that situation? What am I communicating to people? Am I condoning this person's behavior if I'm seen to be next to them? When they finally do meet justice, if that happens, how many times are these clips going to be played on the news and all of a sudden I'm in them as well because I've
Yeah.
worked with this person? You have to think about all these things. And at the end of the day, I said, I'm passionate about my work and this show, and I want to do it. And I haven't assaulted anyone, so I'm going to do it. But any interactions I have with this person, I'm going to make my feelings very clear. And that was the compromise that I just agreed to make with myself. So, you know, in the format of the show, however I could, every time I interacted with him, I told him to his face that I thought he was a predator. And that's just how I dealt with it. I mean,
How
I
did he
haven't,
react back? Did he look shocked? Did he just then accept it or try and make a joke of it or what?
I mean, he had very little reaction to me whatsoever. I feel like I'm a very I'm not someone that he would bother really reacting to. Do you know what I mean? I'm like the kind of woman that he usually probably avoids.
Well, yeah, doesn't sound like a very nice person all round then, basically.
Well, I don't know. This is the thing. Like I feel badly even speculating, but the things that we do behind closed doors, I think we're useful in communicating to a larger audience on Backstage with Katherine Ryan, because I signed up to that show to be honest, show what we talk about backstage. And this is what we talk about backstage. Like, this is how female comedians and performers, and probably in many other industries, have kept themselves safe for a long time. It's worth showing people.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard you talk a lot about self-esteem, and you are what I would describe as a ballsy woman. You're very confident, or that's certainly how you come across. And as women, you know, not just women, but I'm going to generalize. As women, I think that we're conditioned to watch ourselves, not to get too big for our boots. We're brilliant at criticizing ourselves as well. And I genuinely wonder whether you are different to that, and whether your self-confidence is a natural trait. How do we get to kind of be that boss girl better, I suppose? What can you give out in terms of the confidence and self-esteem that I think you've got? And correct me if I'm wrong. How can we channel that, some of us?
I do. I think it is a natural trait, and I've had something of this confidence all of my life, even though it's gotten stronger as I got older. I think in my family, the women were certainly very strong, but also really beautiful, really classically beautiful, and behaved in a way that they were sort of taught by society would make their lives easiest as someone's wife and someone's mother. So I witnessed a lot of quieting of these women, you know, and my mom was taught from a very young age that her appearance was paramount, and that being beautiful was a currency that should be celebrated. Well, the trouble when you grow up like that is we all get old, and then you feel like your value diminishes. And for me, I was lucky because I witnessed this. I was taught from a very young age that your value increases with age, your wisdom and your strength increase. And I have felt that freedom as I got older. I'm way more confident now, nearly 40, than I was when I was 19 or 20 and beautiful, you know. And I feel like that, I hope that strength continues. And I think what I've learned is humility and gratitude. And just through experiences of my friends and their families and their children and their traumas, I think that life is so precious. And as long as my children are happy and healthy and well, then nothing else really matters. And I struggled a lot in this country when Violet was little and I was very young, and things were really frightening for me at that time. And it's when I had nothing that I realized I had everything. And I'm so grateful for that time, because I thought to myself back then, all right, you don't know how you're going to pay your rent, and you're not really sure how you're going to eat next week, and you don't really know how you're ever going to go back to your office job after maternity leave because daycare costs more than the office. And what are you going to do? And you're 3,000 miles away from anyone who loves you. And then I just had a moment of clarity when I went, you have mental health, which not everyone has. And you do have a loving family to fall back on, which not everyone has. And your child is perfect and safe and well. So everything that's come into my life since then has been a bonus. And I think that is where my confidence comes from. Not everyone's going to like me, and that's okay. And I'm not going to articulate myself perfectly all the time. And some people might get offended by one of my jokes, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, I have always had everything.
Mm. Do you worry, especially when we talk about cancel culture? And there's been a few discussions over the summer because of a couple of shows at Edinburgh, for example, where a comedian has said a joke and people think it's gone too far. And there's a big disagreement about whether this is culture wars or not. Was that joke appropriate? Some people think not, and some people think it was fine. There's a real tussle going on, isn't there, I think? Or maybe that's how I'm perceiving it. I don't know. But there's a bit of a tussle going on between, whether shows should be censored. Should they come with a trigger warning at the beginning if any of the content might be deemed as sensitive? What's your take on that? Do you worry about that?
I don't worry about it from my own perspective, because I feel like the jokes that I write, I could always back up and explain, and I might articulate myself irresponsibly, especially if you take something from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because we have evolved so much. But I'd be prepared to discuss that joke and take accountability. But at the end of the day, um, jokes are, for some reason, taken far more seriously than any other art form. There is a litany of serial killer documentaries at the minute where we are recreating terrible experiences of victims and their families, and that's classed as entertainment. Why do we have to even make that again and watch that again? And I feel the same way about dramas or any very serious film that depicts something as really traumatic as child abuse. All of those things are okay in certain genres. And you go, oh, well, that's acting. Well, that's retelling something from history that happened. Well, that's an important topic to illustrate. But then comedy doesn't get that same pass. And what a lot of people fail to realize that comedians are doing is weaving nuance through their material, where sometimes we're trying to show light on a dark subject as well. And we're not always taking the mick in a cheap way, the way so many people think we are. It's almost like every joke now is willfully misunderstood. And it's not up to me or to anyone personally to judge that art and say, well, that's not allowed, but that is allowed. And also, I've accepted that some people want to take offense. They get a kick out of it. They like it. And who am I to take that away from them?
Who are you to deny them? Is anything off limits for you? I mean, we talk about how there should be, the kind of freedom to sort of talk about anything.
Yeah.
But there are subjects, presumably, that you won't talk about or that you wouldn't go near.
For me, there are different words and subjects just that I've learned can upset people in the audience. And I promise you that the vast majority of comedians really never want to upset anyone. That's not our intention. And so if I'm talking about culture or predatory behavior or assault, I will use words like that. I won't use more violent language, just because I've been told by some audience members, even hearing that word makes me feel unwell. Do I think that word should be banned? I don't. I think it's each artist's personal choice, how to articulate themselves. And equally, I've seen material that makes me feel quite uneasy, but I don't think it should be banned. I just think there are things I like and things I don't. My mom always said, if we all like the same thing, we'd all be married to your father. I thought, okay, well, thank goodness we're all different. I think once you start banning language,
yeah,
we may be in trouble.
Yeah, and actually language comes in and out of vogue anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there has to be some personal choice and some personal responsibility there. Look, you're doing a bit of work with the recipe box company Gausto. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's all about how our favorite dishes can trigger memories, and about how Brits, surprise, surprise, are comfort eating more than ever now because, well, it's a bit rubbish out there at the moment, isn't it? And so sometimes, what else is there apart from a nice plate of bangers and mash or something? Tell us what you're up to. That they've basically released a list of Britain's top comfort foods, I think, and the Sunday roast is at the top. Fish and chips, shepherd's pie, bangers and mash, beans on toast, and potato smiley faces ranks in this best list at 7%. Although how you could ever not just smile back at a potato smiley face, I don't know. Of course, it's got to be in there. Did you have a version of that growing up, kind of comfort food that makes you think of growing up in Canada?
We did. And I don't think there are guilty pleasures, just pleasures. And the weather's getting colder. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the news. And I love this idea of comfort food. And I appreciate that Gusto are doing their own twist on nostalgic meals from childhood. And their research has shown, I've been talking to this incredible food psychologist, Dr. Christie, that all the smells of the kitchen growing up and some of the sounds and the flavors, it does release these happy hormones in your brain. And it's important to have dishes from your youth, maybe put on a playlist from your youth as well. So we didn't have the beans on toast to the extent that was popular in the UK, or, the turkey dinosaurs that bring back those happy feelings.
Probably
But
wise.
I know, but Gusto's got this incredible beans on toast burger with crispy potatoes, and they're doing an Indian spice
A
chicken
beans
nugget.
on toast burger.
Yeah, I would never think to put that together myself, but it has really brought me into the world of beans on toast. It is delicious.
How does a beans on toast burger work?
It's great. I mean, you see burgers with any sort of influence. I've had like Mexican burgers with crispy tortillas and a ranch sauce and some jalapenos on there. Beans and toast burger is sort of the same idea, but how these chefs come up with the ingredients, I just don't know. So Gusto is a recipe box company. They also publish all of their recipes online if you just want to look on there for inspiration. But what I love about it is I've been partnered with them for many, many years, and it has taken me away from eating out very often. And I pretty much never order takeaway anymore, because we're enjoying this restaurant quality food at home with almost no food waste whatsoever. And just such imaginative recipes that contain at least one of your five a day. And
Wow.
you don't
Well,
have
you're
to feel
incredible.
guilty about comfort food. Like if you're making
Yeah.
it with fresh ingredients at home, it's good for you.
It sounds good for me. I think also because you can because you know what you're making, you
Mhm.
can envisage what you're making. I think for people like you and I left home pretty early, made a life on my own pretty early, and
Yeah.
that means one of two things: either you're a disaster in the kitchen and it's jack a potato with cheese and beans, my favorite, 4 days a week.
Delicious.
That's what
Yeah.
happens to me. Or you learn to feed yourself properly, which is maybe what's happened to you. I am awful in the kitchen, so I'm all up for tips. How skilled are you in the kitchen generally? Is cooking a big thing for you?
It's not that I'm unskilled. I feel like if you can read, you can cook. Can you invent a recipe? No, that is a different talent. But if you can follow instructions, I think you should be able to make anything. The question is, do I have the patience and the imagination to come up with things on my own? No, I don't. So a lot of these recipes are 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe 45 tops. And it's just so worth it to have the family together at mealtime. I've learned so many tips and tricks, and also ingredients that go together that I never would have thought. Like we're thickening gravy with Marmite now, which even if you don't like
Oh,
Marmite, it's a
mm.
lovely like thick, salty, umami flavor. I learned that from Gusto. Like I'm getting better all the time.
Well, I'll leave it there with that delicious thought of Marmite gravy. Katherine Ryan, thank you so much for speaking to us on Times Radio. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely